She's burning! Get out! Get out! The shout came from outside the tank. Infantry were already backing away. Flames licked out of the Sherman's engine deck, orange against gray smoke, rolling upward in thick, oily waves. Every soldier on the street knew what came next. They'd seen it before. A burning tank was a countdown, not a question. Someone started running. The expectations spread faster than the fire. The tank was finished. Inside the hull, the crew didn't see flames yet. They felt them. Heat poured through the engine firewall like a living thing. The air thickened instantly, choking, metallic. Smoke crept along the floor, curling around boots. The driver coughed and tasted fuel. "Engine's on fire!" The loader turned toward the rear compartment and saw the glow, a flickering orange pulse that didn't belong inside steel. For a split second, nobody moved. Every tanker carried the same image in his head. Fire, ammunition, explosion. No middle step. No mercy. Outside, infantry were shouting again. "Bail out! It's cooking!" The commander looked at the flames, then at the street ahead. They were still in the kill zone. If they stopped here, the tank wouldn't just burn. It would explode in the open, with half the platoon standing beside it. The driver's hands hovered over the controls, waiting, for the order everyone expected. Instead, the commander said, "Drive." The crew stared at him. The tank was on fire, and he wanted to go forward. Smoke filled the turret. Heat clawed at their faces. Somewhere behind them, the flames found something new to eat and roared louder. Outside, the infantry scattered, convinced they were watching a coffin roll toward its own funeral. Inside the burning Sherman, the driver pressed the throttle, and the tank moved. A burning tank is supposed to stop. That's the rule everyone understood. Once flames reached the engine compartment, the clock started ticking. Fuel lines, oil, hydraulic fluid, heat creeping toward ammunition racks. Every tanker had heard the same instruction in training. If it burns, bail out. Because steel becomes an oven faster than courage can compensate. Yet this Sherman was still rolling. Infantry watched it pass through smoke like a ghost that didn't know it was already dead. No one followed. They gave the street to the tank, the way you give space to a falling building. Inside, the crew counted breaths. Not seconds. Breaths. Each inhale hurt. Smoke clawed down their throats and settled in their lungs. The heat was rising in layers, like the air itself was stacking on top of them. Somewhere behind the firewall, the fire was growing. They could hear it now. A low, hungry roar that didn't belong inside a machine. Every man knew what that sound meant. Not yet exploded, but close enough to imagine it. Before the next minute passes, before the flames either reach the ammunition or die, you have to rewind to when the tank was still just a tank, when the crew believed the street ahead was dangerous but survivable, when none of them expected to choose between burning alive or driving deeper into the fight. Because nobody trains for the moment where safety and survival point in opposite directions. And in that moment, the commander had already chosen movement. 10 minutes earlier, the tank felt indestructible. The Sherman rolled at the front of the advance, engine steady, tracks grinding over broken pavement. Infantry moved tight on both sides, trusting the armor the way men trust a wall. Not because it was perfect, but because it was there. The town looked wounded but quiet. Windows empty, doors hanging open, smoke drifting somewhere far off. The kind of silence that tricks soldiers into believing danger lives in the next street, not this one. The commander stood half out of the turret, scanning rooftops. Nothing moved. No muzzle flashes. No shapes breaking the skyline. Just rubble and wind. "Keep pushing," he said. The tank obeyed. Inside, the crew fell into routine. The driver listened to the engine's rhythm. The gunner tracked corners out of habit. The loader rested one hand on a shell he hoped he wouldn't need. It was the calm that comes from repetition. The belief that if disaster arrives, it will look familiar. The shot came from somewhere they weren't watching. A sharp crack, a jolt that punched through the hull. The Sherman lurched as something vital in the rear compartment ruptured. The driver smelled fuel instantly. Then the glow appeared. small at first, a flicker behind the firewall. The loader leaned back to see it and froze. Fire! The word barely left his mouth before the flames answered for him, surging upward in a violent rush. The engine coughed. Smoke poured forward. The interior temperature jumped in a single breath. The calm vanished. The tank wasn't hit hard enough to kill them. It was hit perfectly to burn them. Outside, infantry were already shouting. Inside, the crew understood the equation immediately. They were still inside a machine turning into a furnace, and it was parked in the middle of a kill zone. The fire found air and grew teeth. Flames punched against the firewall in rhythmic bursts, each one hotter than the last. The Sherman filled with rolling smoke so thick it erased edges. Gauges disappeared, faces blurred. The crew moved by memory more than sight. The driver coughed hard enough to see stars. "Ammo!" the gunner started, then stopped. Nobody needed to finish the sentence. Heat was creeping forward. Every shell stacked inside the hull was a promise waiting to break. Outside, the infantry had pulled back completely now. The street around the tank was empty. No one wanted to be close when the ammunition cooked off. A burning Sherman didn't explode gently. It came apart violently, throwing steel in every direction. The crew knew it. They could feel the heat building toward that moment. The commander slapped the intercom. "Keep moving! Don't stop!" The engine protested. Flames were eating the rear compartment, starving it of clean air. The tank lurched forward anyway, coughing black smoke. Every vibration felt fragile, like the machine might seize and trap them in place. The loader's gloves began to smoke. He stared at his hands for half a second, not understanding what he was seeing, then ripped them off and felt the heat bite into his skin. The interior air was turning sharp and dry, stealing moisture from lungs and eyes alike. The gunner couldn't see the street anymore, only smoke. They were driving blind inside a burning coffin. And somewhere behind them, the fire surged louder, as if it had realized it was running out of time. The next step in the equation was simple. Flames, ammunition, end. Every man inside the tank felt that chain tightening. The question wasn't whether the Sherman would explode. It was whether they could outrun the explosion. The commander made the decision no training manual promised would work. "Faster!" The driver shoved the throttle forward. The Sherman surged. Fire roared behind them, angry at the sudden wind feeding it. Smoke whipped forward through the hull, turning the interior into a moving storm. The crew hunched low, eyes burning, navigating by instinct and fragments of memory. They didn't need to see the road. They needed distance. Outside, infantry watched the burning tank accelerate and scattered again, stunned. No one chased it. No one tried to stop it. The Sherman tore through the street, trailing flame like a comet, a machine already declared dead, refusing to lie down. Inside, the heat reached a new level. The loader screamed as a flare of fire licked past the firewall seam. The gunner slapped at it with a jacket, beating flame back for seconds that felt stolen. The commander kept counting under his breath. Not numbers, just rhythm. Anything to drown out the sound of ammunition waiting behind steel. The tank burst out of the kill zone. Open street. Air. The commander fired smoke, dumping a white curtain behind them. The driver swung the Sherman behind a shattered wall and killed the throttle. The engine rattled once, twice, and kept running. The fire had oxygen now, but it had lost time. Crew hatches flew open. Men spilled out coughing, dragging extinguishers, shoveling dirt, beating flame with bare hands and whatever cloth they could grab. The tank burned stubbornly, then hesitated, then shrank. The ammunition never cooked. The explosion everyone expected never came. The Sherman sat scorched and breathing smoke like a wounded animal that refused to die. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. The crew stood around the Sherman, coughing black smoke, hands shaking, faces streaked with soot. The tank ticked and hissed as it cooled, small tongues of flame dying reluctantly along the engine deck. Infantry approached slowly, the way you approach something that already exploded in your head. They expected wreckage. Instead, the tank was still standing. The armor was scorched almost white, paint blistered, rubber burned away. The rear compartment looked peeled open by heat, but the hull was intact. The ammunition racks, the part everyone had been watching from a distance, were untouched. Someone laughed once. Not joy, shock. The commander leaned a hand against the hull and pulled it back instantly. Still hot. Still alive. He looked at the street they'd just crossed, the stretch of pavement where every witness had agreed the tank would end. It hadn't. The crew didn't celebrate. They sat on the curb, breathing hard, staring at the machine that should have killed them and didn't. Every man replayed the same moment. The order to drive forward instead of bailing out armor hadn't saved them. Luck hadn't saved them. Movement had. Seconds stolen from fire. The battalion would move again soon. Another street, another corner, another equation waiting to fail. But for this one moment, the tank that everyone abandoned had driven itself out of its own funeral, and the men who rode inside it understood something simple and permanent. Survival isn't victory. It's borrowed time you earn by refusing to stop.